We're all captivated by stories of murderers and serial killers for some strange reason. The more weird and gruesome the murderers are, the better. There's a good reason why horror films and true crime TV shows are so popular. Well, the same thing chills our spine if it happens in real life. Today, in this video, we're going to go over one such case with the most insane twist you have ever heard. Stay tuned till the end to know more. On July 7, 1985, at the break of dawn, Jane Anchor Hilton, 54, found tragically battered and stabbed in a bedroom at her employee's house, which she had just moved into the day before in order to escape an unpleasant marriage. Two of her housemates, as well as her daughter, Autumn, located Jan. The murderer's motivation remained a mystery for 14 years when the investigation was revived in 1999 by two new detectives. Investigators identified Ricky Davis as a suspect after finding a misquote in an article. Ricky Davis was prosecuted for the crime and found guilty while asserting his innocence. He turned to the same court system that would ultimately land him in jail because he was adamant that he would not give up. Thanks to genetic genealogy research and the tenacity of the Innocent Project, an organization that was committed to uncovering the truth, Davis was acquitted, and the real murderer was discovered. Jane was well known in El Dorado Hills, California. She was a Foothill Times columnist. She frequently wrote about social gatherings in the area for the newspaper. Jane loved her 6 kids very much and frequently wrote poems to encourage them daily. In 1984, she married Archie Hilton after working to obtain her real estate license. But by July 1985, their marriage was beginning to collapse. She then requested aid from her boss, Klein. In El Dorado Hills, Klein had a huge house. Maureen Klein, her daughter, and her boyfriend shared her space. On July 6, 1985, Ricky Davis, Wilma's grandson, and Connie Dahl, his girlfriend, shared a room in the home. Autumn, Wilma's 13-year-old youngest daughter, and Jane were warmly welcomed into her house. It was, by all accounts, a packed house. She had no idea her life would come to an end at 3:30 in the morning on the first night of her new home. At the time, Ricky Davis was 20 years old, and his girlfriend, 19. Autumn was waiting outside when Connie Dahl got back from a party. She said she was overly excited and worried her mother would become upset. All three of them entered the home. In the hallway, there was blood. When they entered Ricky's mother's first room, it was silent. The bleeding body of Jane Hilton was laying on the bed. She had stopped breathing. Maureen and her boyfriend had gone on a camping trip and were not home at the time. Ricky and Connie called 911 paramedics, and police arrived, but Jane was pronounced dead at the scene. She had suffered 29 stab wounds, was beaten and bitten on her shoulder. It was a senseless murder, and investigators began interviewing those closest to Jane. Archie Hilton, Jane's estranged husband, was interviewed and provided detectives with a solid alibi and DNA. Archie had been the logical choice as he and Jane had been through a rough patch. He said the marriage was not over and there was no trouble between them. He was cleared and all leads went cold. For 14 years, the case remained unsolved. The case remained unsolved. The cold case reopened in 1999. El Dorado County Sheriff's Detective Rick Fitzgerald and Richard Strasser were tasked with investigating. After poring over paperwork, they zoomed in on a news article Connie Dahl, former girlfriend of Ricky Davis and housemate of Jane Hilton, had given an interview to a reporter. She said Hilton's body was lying in bed as someone placed her in the position she would usually sleep in. This statement seemed to contradict a muffled audio recording of a statement that Davis had previously made. Detective Fitzgerald falsely thought he heard him say the body was found on the floor. Detectives brought her in for an interview and began a 3-hour-long interrogation. Initially, Dahl stuck to her original story, though she would be questioned 4 times during the following 18 months. There was evidence that detectives used various methods to enhance the likelihood. A phony confession Dahl was repeatedly pressed into, accusing the daughter of Davis and Jane. She cooperated, though she'd be given a lenient sentence of manslaughter and serve only a year. Detective Strasser and Fitzgerald told Dahl that DNA evidence would be used to trace the suspects. But in truth, no DNA evidence was brought into the case during the period. Throughout the 4 interviews, Dahl was starting to break. She began remembering facts from the crime. This allowed her to fabricate and create an entirely different account of events from the night of the murder. Dahl had implicated her ex-boyfriend Davis in the murder of Jane Hilton. He was now the prime suspect. Ricky Davis and Autumn Anchor was also interviewed following the confession of Connie Dahl. Both Davis and Anchor stuck to their original accounts of the crime. Detectives again lied to Davis, telling him that Anchor had also implicated him in the murder. Anchor told detectives she had no reason to protect Davis when they threatened her with guilt regarding the murder. Despite their interrogation techniques, detectives could not sway Davis or Anchor to change their stories. Dahl took the stand and testified against Davis. She told the court how she struggled with Jane and accidentally bit the victim on the shoulder. Based entirely on the testimony of Dahl's account of events, Davis was sentenced to 15 years in prison for the second-degree murder of Jane Hilton. Dahl received a lesser charge of manslaughter and received a year-long sentence at the county jail, though he would eventually die from a drug overdose in 2014. Meanwhile, Davis was not going down without a fight. He maintained his innocence and, in 2006, made contact with the Northern California Innocence Project. After Davis contacted the NCIP in 2006, his case was thoroughly re-examined. Cooperation between the NCIP and the Office of the El Dorado County District Attorney allowed for the DNA recovered from the crime scene to be retested. The results revealed an unknown male DNA profile. Hilton's fingernails and nightgown DNA were found from the same source. Test results eliminated David Dahl and Anchor. This proved Dahl's testimony was contradictory to the physical evidence and therefore had to have been fabricated. The DNA also proved Archie Hilton innocent. Unfortunately, he passed away by the time results were released. The NCIP successfully argued that the DNA results had been presented to the jury during Davis's trial. The outcome would be different. However, until January 2017, the California standards required that new evidence point unerringly to innocence. It was considered an almost unattainable standard in 2015. A false confession expert, Richard Leo, reviewed transcripts of Dahl's interrogations. Leo concluded that the methods used by detectives during the interrogation of Dahl were designed to persuade and pressure Dahl to adopt an account that matched the detectives' pre-existing beliefs about how and why the murder of Jane Hilton occurred. However, the fate of the trial was about to change once again. Advancements in DNA testing led to Davis becoming the first convicted person in California and the second in the United States to be forgiven for a crime. In February 2020, DNA evidence matched a man considered an unlikely suspect. El Dorado County Attorney Vern Pearson announced in February 2020 that a new suspect had been identified as the man linked to the DNA evidence found on Jane Hilton's body. Following the arrest, many people spoke to the media about the man they knew as Michael Green. Green was a longtime resident of Roseville, California. Graduated from Oakmount High School in 1986. He was described as an easygoing, kind, even-tempered, and even chill. One classmate wanted to remain anonymous but could not understand why Green would go to El Dorado Hills and brutally murder a woman. According to reports, Green was 17 years old at the time of Hilton's murder. On the night of July 6, 1985, the victim's daughter, Autumn, met Green and two of his friends, Calvin and Stephen. They hung out together at the park when Autumn decided to go home and shower before returning. Allegedly, Autumn told her mother she was going to another friend's house for the evening. Instead, she returned to the park to join the boys. What happened next is pure speculation. Investigators believe that Green broke into the house during this time and was confronted by Jane. In his struggle to get away, Green may have attacked her in a frenzy following the attack. Green was arrested on February 11, 2020. Since Green was a teenager at the time of the murder, he made his first appearance at a juvenile court on February 19, 2020. District Attorney Vern Pearson said that procedurally the court has to go through steps on the juvenile side of it. Following this, Green was granted transfer to be tried as an adult. He waited 2.5 years before being tried in court. Green pleaded no contest on July 29, 2022. The plea means Green lost hope in his right to a jury trial. A jury trial meant he was to face a charge of first-degree murder. He also gave up his chance to challenge the plea or the consequences of his decision. His sentencing date was set for April 27, 2023, to be presided over by Judge Suzanne Kingsbury. With that, we have come to the end of this video. If you like this video, then make sure to like the video. We'll come again with other curious topics. Until then, goodbye.